The night was still and silent at Fort Houston, a top-secret military base hidden deep in the Arizona desert. Few knew of its existence, and even fewer knew what truly happened within its walls. The peaceful quiet of the desert was shattered when a strange silver spaceship hurtled from the sky, crashing violently into the barren ground. The vessel, sleek and crescent-shaped, glowed with a faint blue light, covered in mysterious symbols no one could read. As the smoke cleared, soldiers quickly rushed to the crash site, their weapons drawn, their minds filled with questions. Was this an alien invasion, or something far more dangerous? What they found, however, was nothing like they expected. 2 alien girls lay unconscious among the wreckage, shackled together in chains. They were not towering monsters or warlike invaders, but 2 young beings, both clearly not from Earth. One was older, her skin a pale blue, her eyes a striking purple that seemed to shimmer even in the dim light. Her expression was fierce, even in unconsciousness, as though she had lived through countless battles. The other was much younger, trembling and frightened, her long silver hair tangled around her face, her eyes wide and filled with fear. She barely seemed to notice the soldiers at first, her eyes fluttering open only for a moment before she closed them again, too weak to move. The soldiers stood frozen, unsure of what to do. Orders were orders, and they were instructed to contain the aliens at all costs, but these girls were no threat. They were simply lost. Despite the absence of any immediate danger, the military didn't care. They were told to detain them, so they did. The aliens were roughly taken into the underground lab beneath the base, the cold metal chains keeping them tethered to one another. No one bothered to ask who they were, where they came from, or what they wanted. They were labeled as specimens, to be studied, observed, and kept locked away in isolation. To the military, they were nothing more than an opportunity for research, an experiment to be controlled. But not everyone at Fort Houston agreed with this treatment. Among the base's staff was a young scientist named Eli, who had only recently joined the research team. While the soldiers saw the aliens as nothing more than objects to be contained, Eli couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more to their story. These were not just prisoners. They were victims, caught in a war they didn't ask for. As he looked at the alien girls through the reinforced glass of their holding cell, Eli began to feel a strange connection, a sense of empathy that he couldn't ignore. The younger girl, whom Eli silently named Lyra, seemed to notice him, her purple eyes locking onto his for just a brief moment. And in that moment, something shifted within Eli. He couldn't explain it. He wasn't supposed to care. But in his heart, he knew he had to do something to help them, even if it meant breaking every rule in the book. Eli spent the following days torn between his duty and the growing feeling that something was wrong. His nights, once filled with peaceful rest, were now haunted by thoughts of the alien girls locked in the lab. The older one, whom he had silently named Cora, was always defiant, her eyes sharp and filled with suspicion whenever anyone came close. The younger girl, Lyra, seemed to be a different story altogether. At first she had been withdrawn, her soft voice barely audible when she spoke at all, but over time Eli noticed small changes in her behavior. She would occasionally glance toward the observation window where he stood, her eyes meeting his, as if searching for something, a connection perhaps. It was subtle, but to Eli, it felt like a lifeline. One night, unable to resist the urge to speak to her, Eli found himself sneaking into the lab when no one else was around. The dim lights flickered overhead, casting long shadows against the cold metal walls. He approached the glass, his heart pounding, and softly called out to Lyra. At first, she didn't respond. She simply stared ahead, her face a mask of exhaustion and fear. But as Eli continued to speak to her, softly, gently, sharing his thoughts and fears with her, telling her that he would find a way to help, the faintest flicker of understanding passed across her face. She didn't speak at first, but then she lifted her hand and began tapping the glass. The movements were small at first, almost imperceptible. But after a moment, Eli realized she was trying to communicate. The taps weren't random. They formed a pattern, a rhythm. It was a language, one he didn't understand, but the intent was clear. She was reaching out. Eli spent the next few nights deciphering the pattern of her taps, piecing together fragments of a message. Slowly, as the days passed, he realized that Lyra wasn't just trying to communicate. She was asking for help. She had learned enough of Earth's language to understand the word freedom, and the more Eli spoke to her, the more she began to respond with gentle movements, showing signs of recognition when he spoke certain words. Cora, however, remained distant, growling whenever anyone approached the cage. Her mistrust was palpable, and Eli couldn't blame her. She had been through much more than Lyra, and the chains around their wrists had only deepened their fear and sorrow. Yet Eli couldn't ignore the quiet plea in Lyra's eyes, the same plea he had seen in countless creatures he had studied before. She wasn't just an alien. She was a being, trapped and in pain, just like him. That night, Eli made a decision. He couldn't let them stay locked away forever, treated as nothing more than experiments. He would find a way to set them free, even if it meant putting everything he had at risk. But to do so, he would need to learn more about the alien chains that bound them. And that meant finding a way to get close to Cora, the one who could hold the key to their escape. Eli's heart raced as he spent long hours researching everything he could about the alien chains that held the two girls captive. Every detail he found only deepened his determination to set them free. The chains weren't ordinary. They were pieces of alien technology, something far beyond anything the military had ever encountered. These chains were designed not just to restrain, but to cause pain whenever the aliens tried to break free. The design was intricate, pulsing with energy, and seemed to feed off the struggle, tightening as the girls resisted. Eli learned that the chains were forged by a powerful intergalactic race, known for their cruelty and control over other species. They used the chains to capture slaves across galaxies, forcing them into servitude. The chains, it seemed, had no simple way of being removed. Eli knew that the military would never reveal this information to the public. They would see the chains as proof that the aliens were dangerous, that they had come to Earth for unknown purposes. But to Eli, they told a different story. The chains were symbols of suffering, not aggression. Lyra's silent desperation only confirmed this. Her soft eyes, always pleading, showed nothing but fear and longing. He couldn't stand seeing them in pain anymore. The realization that he might be the only one who could help them gnawed at him. One night, he found a hidden document in the base's research files that described a device capable of decoding alien tech. The device was designed by a group of rogue scientists, long since forgotten by the main military operations. The device wasn't perfect, but it could work. It was Eli's only hope. With the device in hand, he began to experiment, carefully testing it against the chain's energy fields. Night after night, he snuck back into the lab, keeping a low profile as he worked. He spoke softly to Lyra, explaining what he was doing, hoping she could understand, hoping she would believe him. Cora remained distant, her eyes wary. But Eli could see the way she observed him. She watched him every time he came near. At first, she would growl low, a warning, but gradually she stopped trying to resist. Maybe, just maybe, she understood he wasn't like the others. After several long nights, Eli succeeded. He had managed to decode part of the chain's locking mechanism. The first time he touched the alien device to the chains, sparks flew, and Lyra flinched. The chains began to loosen, slowly, painfully, but with each passing moment their grip weakened. Eli's pulse quickened. He couldn't afford to get caught. If the military found out what he was doing, there would be no way to explain it. But Despite the risk, he couldn't stop now. As Lyra's chains fell to the ground with a heavy thud, a sense of relief washed over him. The first step had been taken, but the real challenge still lay ahead. He had to free Cora, and he had to do it quickly before anyone noticed the change. The clock was ticking, and Eli knew time was running out. Eli's discovery about the alien chains sent a surge of determination through him. He knew the girls weren't just prisoners, they were survivors of a brutal system, forced into servitude across the stars. The more he uncovered, the more he realized the chains weren't ordinary restraints. They were part of a larger web of galactic oppression. The technology, designed by a merciless race, had been used to enslave countless beings, taking away their freedom and dignity. The girls, Lyra and Cora, had escaped their captors, only to be caught once again by Earth's military. Eli couldn't let that happen. The chains that bound them were not just physical. They represented years of abuse and trauma. But even worse, they were a constant reminder of the pain they had endured. Eli couldn't stand the thought of the girls spending their lives in a cold, dark cell, just because the military saw them as experiments. His research led him deeper into the terrifying truth. The chain technology had a unique feature, one that made it virtually impossible to remove without knowing the intricate patterns of alien energy embedded in the links. Eli's heart sank as he realized just how much danger they were all in. If he didn't act quickly, the military would realize what he was doing and stop him before he could free them. But his resolve grew stronger. Eli wasn't willing to abandon them. He had to get the chains off, not just for their safety, but for their dignity. During one of his late-night visits to the lab, Eli overheard a conversation between two of the higher-ranking officers. They were talking about the girls, planning to run more tests on them, not caring about their suffering. The thought of it made Eli sick. He couldn't let this go on. It wasn't just about science anymore. It was about life. He quickly worked on a plan. The decoding device he had built wasn't perfect, but it was enough to unlock the chains if he could get the right access codes. Eli had memorized the layout of the base, the guards' patrols, and the moments when the cameras would be down for maintenance. Time was running out, and he needed a way to get to Cora's chains without alerting the military. He spent the next few days preparing, knowing that he couldn't do it alone. The risk was too high. But even as he prepared, something shifted in him. Lyra had begun to trust him, and Cora, although still wary, showed signs of softening. She didn't see Eli as an enemy. It wasn't much, but it was enough to give him hope. The night of the escape came faster than Eli had expected. With the decoding device in hand and the knowledge of the base's layout firmly in his mind, he snuck into the lab once more. This time, he wasn't just there to observe, he was there to set them free. The room was silent as Eli approached. Cora's chains. She watched him closely, and for the first time, he saw a glimmer of trust in her eyes. He knew he couldn't mess this up. One wrong move, and the entire plan would fail. He pressed the device to the links. Sparks flew as the chains began to weaken, and with a final, gentle twist, they fell to the ground. Eli's heart pounded in his chest. It had worked. Cora was free. Now, the real challenge lay ahead, escaping the base before anyone noticed they were gone. The air inside the base felt colder than ever as Eli stood, breath caught in his throat, staring at the fallen chains that had held Cora captive. His hands trembled as he took a step back, watching her test her newfound freedom. Cora flexed her wrists, the weight of the chains gone. Her eyes locked with Eli's, no longer filled with the icy mistrust they had held for so long. A flicker of something, maybe gratitude, maybe something deeper, passed between them. Eli couldn't afford to let himself feel too much relief, though. Time was running out. The alarms could sound at any moment. The military would be searching for them, and if they were caught, Eli would be seen as a traitor, a fool who had risked everything for aliens. Cora stepped cautiously toward him, her movements stiff, but the chains were gone, and that alone made her feel freer. Eli motioned for her to follow him, his eyes scanning the lab for any sign of movement. Outside the door, Lyra was waiting, her anxious face peeking from behind the corner. She had been silent through the entire process, watching with wide eyes as Eli unlocked Cora's chains. The moment Lyra saw that Cora was free, she rushed forward, her small frame trembling as she hugged her friend. Eli stepped back, watching them for a moment. The two girls had been through so much, their bond unspoken but powerful. They didn't need words. They understood each other, but they needed to leave before it was too late. He motioned again, more urgently this time. The girls nodded in understanding and followed him through the dimly lit hallways. The building felt like a maze, every turn bringing them closer to the exit. Yet the sounds of distant footsteps and the echo of voices made it clear that time was slipping away. Eli had memorized the layout of the base, but even with that knowledge, the tension was unbearable. His heart raced as they crept closer to the exit. Lyra's trembling hand grabbed his arm, and he looked down to find her face filled with fear. She was scared, but also hopeful. Cora, the stronger of the two, kept her eyes forward, scanning every shadow. They were a team now, and Eli could feel the unspoken trust growing between them. Finally, they reached the security gate that led to the outside world. Eli approached the console, his fingers trembling as he entered the emergency override code he had secretly acquired. The door creaked open, and the cool night air greeted them. It was the first taste of freedom they had in so long. They stepped out into the dark desert, the stars above them offering a glimmer of hope. The world outside the base was vast and wild, a place where no one could control them. Eli turned back to the girls, his heart filled with a mixture of fear and exhilaration. There was still so much to do, so many obstacles ahead, but in that moment, as the gate closed behind them, they had escaped. The military would soon come after them, but for now, they were free. Eli felt the weight of his choice, knowing there was no turning back. He had risked everything, and yet, as he watched the girls, he knew he had made the right decision. They weren't just survivors of a cruel system. They were his allies now, and together, they would fight for the freedom they all deserved. Eli, Cora, and Lyra had been running for hours, their footsteps echoing in the vast desert. The moon hung high in the sky, casting a soft glow over the barren landscape. The night was cold, and the wind howled across the plains, but the three of them didn't stop. They couldn't afford to. Every minute that passed brought them closer to danger. Eli knew the military would be searching for them by now, tracking their every move. The desert offered some cover, but it wouldn't take long for the satellites to lock onto their position. He had to get them far away, deeper into the wilderness, where the government's reach couldn't touch them. Cora, though still wary, had proved herself invaluable. Her strength and knowledge of the alien technology they had encountered made her an asset. Eli had learned that she wasn't just a prisoner. She was a warrior, a fighter, hardened by a lifetime of captivity. She knew how to survive, how to read the signs of danger, and how to stay out of sight. But Lyra, the younger girl, was different. She was still fragile, her fear evident in every step she took. Though Eli could sense her growing trust, Lyra was terrified, not just of the world around her, but of the memories that haunted her. Every time they stopped to rest, she would look over her shoulder, her eyes wide with panic. Eli could feel her pain. She had been through so much more than he could imagine, and now she was free. But the cost of that freedom weighed heavily on her. As they made their way further into the desert, Eli's mind raced. He had no plan beyond survival, no backup, no way to ensure their safety. The military would track them down sooner or later, and when they did, there would be no mercy. Still, the thought of returning to the base, of seeing those chains again, made his stomach turn. He couldn't let the girls go back to that. They deserved better, and Eli had promised himself that he would give them that, no matter what it took. The terrain grew harsher as they moved deeper into the desert. The ground became rocky and the air grew thinner. Eli could see the exhaustion in Cora's eyes, but she kept moving, never stopping, never complaining. Lyra, too, pressed on, though her energy was clearly fading. Eli knew they couldn't keep running forever. They needed shelter, food, and water, things they didn't have. But the longer they traveled, the more he realized they were running out of time. The military would be relentless. Just as Eli began to fear they might not make it much farther, they stumbled upon an old, abandoned shack, its wooden walls weathered and worn by time. It wasn't much, but it was shelter. The moment they entered, exhaustion took over. Eli and the girls collapsed onto the dusty floor, too tired to think about the next move. But the shelter was temporary. They couldn't stay in one place for too long. The military would find them, and then what? Eli knew they needed help, something bigger than themselves to survive the coming storm. But for now, as they rested in the relative safety of the shack, he found himself looking at the two alien girls and realizing something he hadn't let himself admit. They were more than just survivors. They were his friends now, and together, they would fight to stay free. But the battle ahead would be unlike anything any of them had ever faced. The days that followed in the shack were a blur of fear, uncertainty, and exhaustion. The trio remained hidden, their every movement calculated, their conversations kept to whispers. Eli knew they couldn't stay there forever. The military would eventually find them. Their position was growing more precarious with each passing moment. Lyra's fear didn't subside, and Cora's stoic demeanor cracked more each day, revealing the trauma she'd carried with her for so long. Eli's promise, to them, to give them the freedom they deserved, seemed more impossible with every passing hour. But despite the weight of the situation, something in the girls began to shift. Cora, the hardened fighter, started to share bits of her past. She spoke of the distant planet where she had been born, a world torn apart by war, where the powerful had ruled over the weak, and where she had once been free, before the chains, before the long years of slavery. Her voice was cold as she spoke of her people, the way they had been enslaved and hunted across the stars. But there was something else there too, a fierce spark, a burning desire for justice, for freedom. It was a fire that had never truly died. Lyra, on the other hand, was quieter, her eyes haunted, as if she carried a weight far heavier than her small body could bear. She barely spoke of her past, and when she did, it was only fragments, fleeting moments of pain that cut too deep. But in the moments when Cora spoke, Lyra would listen intently, as if drawing strength from her older companion. As Eli listened to the two of them, something shifted in him. They were not just survivors. They were warriors in their own right. Despite everything they had endured, they had not given up on the possibility of a future, of freedom. And that, more than anything, was the spark of hope Eli needed to keep going. But the harsh reality of their situation never left his mind. The military was closing in. He could feel it. Their satellites were bound to pick up any movement, and there was nowhere left to hide. The girls needed a place where they could truly be free, where the chains of the past wouldn't haunt them anymore. Eli knew the only way they would truly escape was to leave Earth altogether. A plan began to form in his mind, one that seemed almost impossible. The girls needed a ship, an escape route to the stars. Fortunately, Eli knew where to find one. During his time at the base, he had discovered something that might work. An old, decommissioned spacecraft hidden deep in the military's archives. It was not much, but it was enough to get them off Earth, away from the clutches of those who would enslave them again. With renewed determination, Eli shared his plan with Cora and Lyra. There was fear in their eyes, fear of the unknown, fear of the vastness of space. But there was also something else, trust. They were with him, no matter the danger, no matter the odds. Together, they would escape. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about freedom. As they prepared for the final leg of their journey, Eli couldn't help but feel that, in some strange way, this was only the beginning of a much larger story. A story of defiance, of love, and of a fight for a future free from the chains of the past. The road ahead was long, but for the first time in days, Eli felt a glimmer of hope that they might just make it.